A winter storm swept through Texas in February 2021. Temperatures were below zero. Wind turbines froze up. Natural gas plants went offline because their equipment was not winterized. And the Texas power grid, which is, by the way, intentionally disconnected from the rest of the U.S. grid for reasons we'll get to, came within 4 minutes and 37 seconds of a total uncontrolled collapse. Not a blackout. The end. Like damage to infrastructure so bad it could take months to restore power for 25 million people. Around 250 people died. Millions were without power for days in below zero temperatures. The economic loss was in the range of $80 to $130 billion. And when the dust settled and people began asking who was to blame, the answer was everywhere and nowhere all at once. A patchwork of private utilities, an unknown grid operator, a regulatory structure dating to the 1990s, and a deregulated electricity market that had been underfunding reliability for 2 decades. Have you ever paid an electricity bill and wondered where the money goes? This is the video for you. Subscribe, I post videos like this weekly. Let's face it, what you're about to see in this video is going to piss you off. That's the idea. Today we're going to look at who owns the electricity grid, how money flows through it, why your electricity bill keeps going up while the grid is falling apart, and why the next decade will force a complete rethinking of the infrastructure most of those in power have tried to ignore their entire careers. Let's first get on the same page about what we're talking about, because most people think of the grid as one thing, and it's really not. The North American grid is divided into 3 major interconnections. The Eastern interconnection is everything east of the Rockies, but Texas. The Western interconnection is all that is west of the Rocky Mountains. And then there's ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which is a whole separate island, deliberately severed from the rest of the U.S. grid so Texas could avoid federal regulation. That decision, made decades ago, is a big reason why 2021 went the way it did. The average age of a large power transformer in the U.S. is 40+ years. The lifespan of a large transformer is 40 years. We're running the grid on infrastructure that is already at the end of its design life, on average. That's the physical reality of what we're talking about. Now, let's talk about who owns it and how they make money off it. The U.S. grid is a patchwork of investor-owned utilities, publicly owned municipal utilities, and rural electric cooperatives. The breakdown is roughly 68% investor-owned, 21% publicly owned, and 11% cooperatives. It's the utilities that the investor owns that are important here, because that's where the financial structure gets interesting. The transmission lines, distribution networks, and in many cases, the power plants that feed them are owned by companies such as NextEra Energy, Duke Energy, Southern Company, Dominion Energy, and about 150 others. They are regulated monopolies in their service area. You can't pick your utility provider like you can pick your phone carrier. You take who owns the wires. And here is the financial model that makes this business so dependable for investors. Utilities are guaranteed a return, usually 9 to 11%, on their rate base. The rate base is the amount of their investment in capital, power plants, transmission lines, distribution infrastructure, substations. That structure signifies something very specific. For every dollar a utility spends in capital, that dollar is added to the rate base, and they get a guaranteed return on it. For a regulated utility, spending money is not just an expense, it's how they increase their profit. Build more infrastructure, put it in the rate base, make a return on it forever from customers' bills. Once you notice it, it creates a genuinely strange incentive. A utility that invests aggressively in new infrastructure earns. A utility that is saving money and operating with a lean infrastructure is not growing its rate base, not growing its return, and is underperforming financially. The system is designed to reward capital expenditure. It's not particularly designed to reward efficiency. And it is not specifically designed to reward reliability. Not directly anyway. Not until things go very wrong. Your utility company has an economic incentive to spend money. That's why your bill is always going up. Subscribe to my channel. And I promise you will see how the systems really work. Texas is the case study that shows what happens when you do it differently. ERCOT runs a deregulated electricity market. In most of the U.S., the utility owns generation, transmission, and distribution and receives regulated returns on all of them. Texas broke those apart. Generation is competitive power companies bid into the market. Prices are set by supply and demand in real time. And the theory is that competition drives efficiency and investment. Transmission and distribution continue to be regulated. ERCOT, the grid operator, handles this balancing and reliability. The deregulated generation market served reasonably well to keep the electricity cheap in normal conditions. The problem is that in competitive markets, you don't get paid for capacity that you're not using. So if you build a natural gas plant that only runs 10 days a year, when demand is at its peak, the revenue from those 10 days has to cover your entire capital cost and give you a return. The math doesn't add up. So generators don't build in the reserve capacity to make the grid resilient during extreme events. Texas had no regulations that required power plants to winterize their equipment. This was not normally a problem in winter. It was a disaster in February 2021. There was no financial motivation for the generators to spend money on something that might never be needed. And they didn't. And then the need came. Interesting. What was the response after the storm? Texas passed laws requiring some winterization. ERCOT was something else. Then another winter storm in 2023 caused similar problems. Same, but less severe. The structural incentives hadn't fundamentally changed. The generators still weren't being paid for resilience they couldn't demonstrate they'd need. And this is where the story becomes current. For the power grid is about to get more investment than it has in decades, and who pays for it will be one of the defining financial and political battles of the next decade. The grid has to do two things at the same time, and both are enormously expensive. It has to connect huge amounts of new renewable generation, wind farms in the middle of nowhere, solar farms in the deserts, to population centers hundreds or thousands of miles away. And it must be hardened against the increasing number of extreme weather events, cyber attacks, and physical security threats. In 2021, the American Society of Civil Engineers estimated that the U.S. needs to invest approximately $208 billion in transmission infrastructure alone over the next decade to simply meet reliability standards. That's before the additional investment for the clean energy transition. Estimates of the total need to modernize the grid vary, but range from $2 to $4 trillion over the next 20 to 30 years. NextEra Energy, the largest utility by market cap in the U.S., said it plans to spend $85 to $95 billion on infrastructure over 5 years. That capital spend goes into the rate base. That return is received from customers. You're going to pay for this. The only questions are how much and when. Here's what I really think about all this, and I'll be blunt. The U.S. power grid is a system with such misaligned incentives in ways that are totally predictable and that almost no one in a position of authority wants to fix, because fixing them would either require raising bills faster than voters will accept or lowering the guaranteed returns that utility shareholders have been promised. The regulatory model was written for a different grid, a different time. It rewards capital spending over efficiency, so utilities build a lot of infrastructure. Some of that infrastructure is really needed. Some of it is rate-base padding. Customers pay for both, and they largely can't tell the difference because the rate cases that set their bills are filed in regulatory proceedings that most people don't know exist. Competition was supposed to fix this with deregulation, but competition doesn't pay for reliability. It pays for the cheapest thing that wins the bid of the day. Texas proved this on a large scale, with real consequences for real people. Subscribe to my channel, and in the next video I will lead you to a completely different but very interesting topic. We've been talking about the visible infrastructure, dams, mines, refineries, power lines. The next video is about infrastructure you've likely never considered, but it's the bedrock of your entire digital life: submarine internet cables. Real fiber optic cables on the ocean floor, thousands of kilometers long, carrying almost all the data that goes between continents. Who owns these? Mostly Google and Meta. How did this come about? Why is this geopolitically important? And what if you cut yourself, which is more common than you think? And that's what we're going to see next video. See you then.